I didn't notice it the first time because humiliation rarely announces itself. It slips in quietly, dressed as humor, disguised as concern, wrapped in words that sound harmless if you don't stop to examine them. That's how my sibling always did it. Never openly cruel, never loud enough to be accused, just precise enough to make sure everyone else heard. It usually happened when people were around. At family gatherings, someone would ask what I was working on, and before I could answer, my sibling would step in with a laugh. "Oh, they help me out sometimes," they'd say, waving a hand like my role was background noise. Not a lie, just incomplete. People would nod, conversations would move on, and I would stand there, smiling politely, pretending nothing had happened, because reacting would have made me look insecure. That was the trap. I knew it, they knew it too. Over time, the comments sharpened. At a cousin's engagement dinner, someone asked about a project we were both involved in. I handle the serious decisions, my sibling said easily. They're more supportive. Supportive. The word followed me home that night. I told myself it didn't matter. That titles didn't matter. That people who mattered would see the truth. But deep down, I knew something else was happening. My sibling wasn't just enjoying the attention. They were rewriting the story, slowly, publicly, in front of witnesses. And I was letting it happen. Not because I was weak. Because I was patient. Behind the scenes, our lives were tangled in ways no one else understood. Shared accounts, shared responsibilities, shared access to things that looked simple on the surface but were complicated underneath. On paper, we were equals. In practice, my sibling loved being visible, loved being praised, loved being the face of everything. I handled the rest. They called it division of roles. I called it leverage. The humiliation crossed a line the night it happened somewhere that actually mattered. It wasn't a family event. It wasn't casual. It was a professional gathering where introductions carried weight and impressions lingered. People there didn't forget names easily. Or faces. We were introduced together. Before I could speak, my sibling laughed lightly and said, "I take care of the big picture. They mostly help with execution." There it was again. Help. The people around us nodded politely. Some smiled. One person patted my arm like I was a junior partner. I didn't correct anyone. I watched. I listened. I remembered who heard it. On the drive home, my sibling was in a great mood. Talking fast. Replaying moments. So pleased with how everything had gone. "You don't mind, right?" they said casually, eyes on the road. It just sounds cleaner when one person's clearly in charge. I looked out the window. The city lights blurred past. "If it works for you," I said. They mistook my calm for consent. That night, instead of sleeping, I opened my laptop. Not to confront. Not to plan revenge. To review. I went through everything we shared. Every access point. Every agreement. Every responsibility that quietly had my name attached to it. Things my sibling never looked at because they trusted me to handle them. Trusted me not to rock the boat. I realized something unsettling. My sibling's confidence didn't come from strength. It came from assumption. They assumed I would always stay quiet. They assumed I would always clean up. They assumed I would never use the same system they benefited from. They were wrong. I didn't change anything that night. I didn't send messages. I didn't warn them. I simply stopped protecting them from their own arrogance. Over the next few weeks, the public comments continued. The jokes got bolder. The dismissals more casual. Each time, there were more witnesses. More people absorbing the version of me my sibling wanted them to believe. And each time, I smiled. Because humiliation only works when it's one-sided. And my sibling had no idea that privately, the ground beneath them was already shifting. Slowly, legally, quietly, they were winning the room. I was taking notes. The first crack didn't show up where anyone could see it. That was the problem. Publicly, my sibling was thriving. People repeated their words back to them. Invitations started coming directly to their phone instead of through shared channels. They were being treated like the authority, the decision maker, the person in charge. Exactly as they wanted. Privately, things were starting to feel off. They didn't notice it at first because arrogance dulls awareness. When you believe you're untouchable, you stop checking the ground beneath your feet. The first time they felt it, they brushed it off. A payment delay, a document request, a system error, message that shouldn't have been there. They complained to me casually one evening, scrolling on their phone while talking. "Something weird's going on with one of the accounts," they said. "Probably just admin stuff." I nodded, non-committal. "Can you look at it later?" they asked, not even looking up. Sure, I said. I didn't, because it wasn't an error. It was exposure. Weeks earlier, after that professional event, I had done something small and completely legal. I had separated responsibilities that had never been meant to be permanent. I documented roles that had always been informal. I clarified authority where assumptions had been doing the heavy lifting. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just enough to make the system start asking questions. My sibling hated questions. The second crack came with witnesses. At another gathering, this one smaller but more influential, someone asked a direct question about a project my sibling had been bragging about for months. They answered confidently, and then someone followed up. Who handles compliance on that? My sibling hesitated, just a fraction of a second. Enough. They glanced at me instinctively. I smiled. Oh, I said lightly, that goes through me. The room shifted, not dramatically, just enough for people to notice there was more to the story than they'd been told. My sibling laughed it off. Right, team effort, but the spell had cracked. On the way home, they were quieter. You didn't have to jump in like that, they said. I answered a question, I replied. They didn't argue, but something in their tone had changed. Less playful, more alert. That night, they called me instead of texting. I need access to some files, they said. Urgent. Which ones? I asked. The ones you handle. I'll send what's relevant, I said. There was a pause. You always just give me access, they said slowly. Things are more formal now, I replied. Another pause. They didn't like that word. Formal. Over the next few days, small inconveniences piled up for them. Approvals took longer. Requests required clarification. People started CCing me instead of trusting my sibling's word alone. Nothing catastrophic, just irritating, just enough to disrupt the rhythm they relied on. They confronted me one evening, irritation barely masked. Why does it feel like you're pulling back? They asked. I met their eyes calmly. I'm just doing my role. My role, they corrected. No, I said, mine. That was the first time they looked genuinely uncomfortable. Because for years, mine had meant ours, as long as it benefited them. Now it sounded like a boundary. They laughed it off, but their confidence was gone. At the next public event, they introduced me differently. This is my sibling, they said carefully. We work together. It was an improvement. It was also too late. Because people had started asking me questions directly now. Quiet ones, specific ones, the kind you ask when you sense there's more beneath the surface. I answered honestly, calmly, without drama, and each answer gently contradicted the version of events my sibling had been selling. Not aggressively, not emotionally, just factually. The humiliation began to reverse direction. Slowly, privately, my siblings started spiraling. They asked more questions, checked more things, grew defensive. They accused me of changing and acting different. They weren't wrong. I had changed. I stopped protecting them. One night, they snapped. You think you're smarter than me now? They demanded. I didn't raise my voice. I think you forgot how much of this depended on me staying quiet. That shut them up, but it didn't stop them. Instead, they made a decision. A desperate one. They decided to force control back in public, one last time, by making an announcement they assumed I wouldn't challenge. An announcement that involved commitments they didn't actually have authority to make. An announcement made in front of the wrong people. I heard about it an hour after it happened. And when I did, I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I opened my laptop. Because if humiliation had started this story, then consequences were about to finish it. I didn't find out about the announcement from them. I found out from someone who mattered. A short message landed on my phone late that afternoon. Polite, curious, dangerous in its simplicity. Hey, quick question. Are you really taking over full responsibility for that rollout? I stared at the screen. I hadn't agreed to anything. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't even been consulted. They had stood in a room full of people and promised something using my silence as collateral. I replied calmly, no, I'm not. The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again. That's not what we were told. I closed my laptop and exhaled slowly. This was the moment, not because I was angry, but because the line had finally been crossed publicly. My sibling had always relied on one thing, that I would correct them privately, if at all. They hadn't expected me to let the truth stand on its own. Within an hour, messages started coming in. Quiet ones, clarifying ones, people asking for confirmation, documentation, proof. I gave it to them. Not emotionally, not defensively, professionally. I forwarded emails. shared timelines, clarified roles, explained responsibilities exactly as they were, on record, in writing, with dates and signatures. Each message did something important. It removed confusion, and it removed my siblings' shield. That evening, they called me. Over and over. I let it ring. Then came the texts. What are you doing? You're embarrassing me. We can talk about this. Talk. They only wanted conversation when control was slipping. I didn't respond until the next morning. We already did, I wrote. Publicly. They showed up at my place unannounced that afternoon. No confidence this time. No performance. Just panic leaking through frustration. You blindsided me, they said the moment I opened the door. I didn't invite them in. You volunteered me for something you don't control, I replied. You could have corrected it quietly, they snapped. I met their eyes. You could have stopped humiliating me quietly. That landed. They ran a hand through their hair, pacing. You're ruining my reputation. I stayed calm. You built it on my silence. They stared at me like they were finally seeing the math they'd ignored for years. Behind the scenes, the fallout was already spreading. People pulled back. Meetings were rescheduled. Promises were questioned. Authority was re-evaluated. The confidence my sibling had enjoyed began evaporating, not because of drama, but because of doubt. Doubt is fatal to arrogance. Within days, the narrative shifted. Instead of the one in charge, my sibling became the one who overstated. Instead of leadership, there were explanations. Instead of admiration, there was distance. They tried to regain ground by confronting me publicly at the next gathering. It didn't work. When they made a comment about my role, someone else corrected them. Oh, I thought they handled that, another person said casually. The room adjusted. My sibling smiled tightly. I didn't. That was the last time they tried to belittle me in front of anyone. Privately, they unraveled. They accused me of betrayal. Of changing. Of being cold. They weren't wrong. I had changed. I stopped letting humiliation pass as humor. I stopped trading my dignity for peace. I stopped making myself smaller so they could feel larger. A month later, the shared projects were restructured. Responsibilities reassigned. Access revoked where it didn't belong. Everything that had once been understood was now documented. My sibling lost more than status. They lost leverage. The final message I received from them was short. You didn't have to destroy me. I read it once, then replied with the truth. I didn't. I just stopped protecting you from yourself. After that, there was silence. And for the first time, it wasn't heavy. It was clean. The people who mattered saw me clearly now, not because I demanded recognition, but because I allowed the truth to exist without interference. My sibling learned something they never expected to learn from me. Public humiliation feels powerful, until the private foundation collapses. They tried to control the room. I controlled the reality underneath it. And when the two finally met, there was no contest.